Lieutenant Sarah Chen adjusted the scope on her custom rifle for the 100th time that morning. The weapon looked ancient compared to the sleek energy rifles carried by her alien teammates. Where theirs hummed with blue plasma coils and holographic displays, hers was all metal and wood, with mechanical parts that clicked and scraped when she moved. The Galactic Defense Academy's training ground stretched across the red plains of Kepler Station. Dozens of species from across the galaxy had gathered here to train for the upcoming war against the Void Swarm, a mysterious enemy that had been consuming entire star systems on the outer rim. Sarah sat cross-legged on a rocky outcrop, cleaning her rifle with practiced movements. Around her, the other recruits whispered and pointed. She caught fragments of their conversations in the universal translator embedded in her helmet. "Look at that primitive human weapon," chittered a Zephyrian, its crystalline body reflecting the twin suns overhead. "Does it even have targeting assistance?" A towering Korath, its gray skin rippling with muscle, let out a rumbling laugh. "Humans and their attachment to old technology. My plasma cannon can vaporize a target from 5 kilometers away." Sarah ignored them, running an oiled cloth along the barrel of her rifle. The weapon had belonged to her grandfather, who had used it in Earth's final world war before humanity joined the galactic community. She had modified it extensively over the years, adding her own improvements while keeping the core mechanics unchanged. "Chen!" The voice boomed across the training ground. Sarah looked up to see Instructor Vex striding toward her position. The Nexari was one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy, with 4 arms and skin that changed color based on his mood. Currently, it was a deep purple, indicating displeasure. "Yes, sir," Sarah said, standing and shouldering her rifle. "The other recruits are complaining about your equipment," Vex said, his voice carrying across the training ground. "They say it's unfair that you're using such an outdated weapon in what's supposed to be advanced combat training." More whispers rippled through the assembled recruits. Sarah noticed several of them nodding in agreement. A tall Ilarian with silver skin stepped forward. "Instructor, if I may," the Ilarian said, his voice melodious despite the edge to it. "Commander Theiss speaks for many of us. The human's weapon lacks even basic targeting systems. It seems beneath the standards of this academy." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her expression neutral. She had heard variations of this complaint throughout her military career. Humans were still newcomers to galactic society, having only made contact 50 years ago. Many older species viewed them as primitive, their technology crude compared to weapons that could bend space or manipulate matter at the atomic level. Instructor Vex's skin shifted to a lighter purple as he considered the complaint. Around them, more recruits gathered to watch the confrontation. Sarah counted at least 30 different species, all with weapons that made her rifle look like a museum piece. "Very well," Vex said finally. "Today's exercise will be a simple marksmanship test. Each recruit will engage targets at various ranges and under different conditions. We'll see how primitive human technology performs against modern galactic weapons." He gestured toward a series of targets that had risen from the ground across the training field. They ranged from simple stationary circles at 500 meters to complex moving holograms at distances exceeding 2 kilometers. "The test begins now," Vex announced. "You have 1 hour to engage as many targets as possible. Points are awarded based on accuracy, target difficulty, and range. The recruit with the lowest score will be dismissed from the program." Sarah felt her stomach clench. She had worked years to earn a place at the academy, passing physical and mental tests that had eliminated thousands of other candidates from across human space. The thought of being dismissed because of species prejudice made her jaw tighten. Commander Theiss was the first to begin firing. His energy rifle projected a beam of coherent light that struck target after target with mechanical precision. The weapon's computer-assisted targeting system calculated wind speed, gravity variations, and atmospheric conditions in microseconds. Within minutes, He had eliminated a dozen targets at various ranges. Other recruits followed suit. The Korath's plasma cannon lived up to its boast, vaporizing distant targets with thunderous roars. A group of insectoid chithi worked together, their hive mind allowing them to coordinate shots with perfect timing. Each species showcased weapons that seemed to defy the laws of physics as Sarah understood them. When her turn came, Sarah moved to the firing line with deliberate calm. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her, waiting for the primitive human to fail. Some were already smirking, anticipating an easy victory. Sarah dropped into a prone position and extended the bipod legs of her rifle. She peered through the scope, adjusting for the planet's gravity and atmospheric conditions. Unlike the others, she had no computer to calculate these factors for her. Instead, she relied on years of training and an intuitive understanding of ballistics that had been drilled into her since childhood. The first target appeared at 800 meters. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the meditative state that marked a true sniper. She squeezed the trigger gently, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder with a sharp crack that sounded pitifully weak compared to the energy weapons around her. The target vanished, struck dead center. A murmur went through the watching crowd, but Sarah was already tracking to her next target. This one moved in an unpredictable pattern at 200 meters, weaving between obstacles. She led the target carefully, accounting for its speed and trajectory, then fired again. Another hit. As she continued firing, something strange began happening among the watching recruits. The whispers changed in tone. Where before there had been mockery and dismissive laughter, now there was uncertainty. Some of the more experienced warriors began paying closer attention to her technique. Sarah eliminated target after target with methodical precision. Her rifle might lack the raw power of plasma weapons or the technological sophistication of energy beams, but it had something the others lacked: reliability. While other recruits occasionally missed due to weapon overheating or targeting system glitches, Sarah's shots remained consistent. At the 15-minute mark, a new series of targets appeared. These were smaller, faster, and partially concealed behind cover. Several recruits attempted them and failed, their high-tech weapons struggling with targets that required intuition rather than computational power. Sarah studied the pattern for several seconds, then began firing. Her first shot struck a target that had been visible for less than half a second. The second punched through a narrow gap between two barriers to hit a moving target beyond. By now, the entire training ground had fallen silent except for the crack of Sarah's rifle. Even Instructor Vex was watching with interest, his skin shifting through various colors as he processed what he was seeing. The final challenge appeared at the 30-minute mark, a series of targets at maximum range, nearly 3 kilometers away. At this distance, even the most advanced energy weapons began losing coherency. Most recruits didn't even attempt these targets. Sarah adjusted her scope one final time and settled into her shooting position. At this range, she had to account for planetary rotation, air temperature variations at different altitudes, and even the gravitational influence of the planet's 3 moons. Her grandfather had taught her to feel these factors rather than calculate them, to become one with her weapon and her environment. She fired once. Through her scope, she saw the distant target disappear. The watching recruits erupted in shocked chatter. Commander Thys stepped forward, his silver skin now pale with disbelief. "Impossible," he said. "No primitive kinetic weapon could maintain accuracy at that range. The targeting computer shows—" "Computers can fail," a quiet voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see Instructor Vex approaching Sarah's position. His skin had settled into a deep blue that Sarah had learned indicated respect. "Only snipers know best," Vex said, his words carrying clearly across the silent training ground. "True marksmanship isn't about having the most advanced weapon. It's about understanding your tool, your environment, and yourself. It's about becoming something more than the sum of your parts." He looked directly at Sarah, and she saw something in his 4 eyes that she hadn't expected. Recognition. The human has achieved something that no amount of technology can replicate, Vex continued. She has become one with her weapon. While the rest of you rely on computers to think for you, she has trained herself to feel what the machines can only calculate. Sarah stood slowly, her rifle still warm in her hands. Around her, the other recruits looked at her with new eyes. The mockery was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect, or perhaps fear. The exercise is concluded, Vex announced. Chen has scored perfect marks. The rest of you... His skin darkened ominously. Perhaps you should consider what you might learn from primitive human technology. As the other recruits dispersed, many casting uncertain glances back at Sarah, she remained on the firing line. The test had been about more than marksmanship, she realized. It had been about proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars. That advancement wasn't always about having 3 weeks after the shooting demonstration. Sarah found herself assigned to Alpha Squad, the Academy's elite unit reserved for the most promising recruits. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same aliens who had mocked her primitive weapon now requested her presence on their team. The squad consisted of 8 members from different species, each bringing unique skills to the group. Besides Sarah, there was Commander Thys, the silver-skinned Ilarian who had initially complained about her equipment. The massive Korath warrior, Grimjaw, carried his plasma cannon with the same dedication Sarah showed her rifle. 3 insectoid Chithi operated as a single unit, their hive mind allowing unprecedented coordination. Zex, a shape-shifting morpher, served as their infiltration specialist. Finally, there was Kira, a telepathic scion whose mental abilities could detect enemies through solid barriers. Their first real mission came sooner than expected. Intelligence reports indicate Void Swarm scouts have been detected in the Outer Reach, Instructor Vex briefed them in the war room. Holographic displays showed star charts with red markers indicating suspected enemy positions. Your squad will investigate a research station on Kepler 442b that went dark 3 days ago. This is a reconnaissance mission. Observe, report, and withdraw. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Sarah studied the tactical display. The research station sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills, perfect sniper territory. The facility itself was a cluster of dome-shaped buildings connected by enclosed walkways designed to protect researchers from the planet's harsh storms. "What's the terrain like?" Sarah asked. Vex manipulated the display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the area. Rocky desert, similar to Earth's southwestern regions. Minimal vegetation, excellent sight lines. Maximum engagement range should be around 4 kilometers, given atmospheric conditions. Sarah nodded. Her rifle could handle that range, though it would require perfect conditions and all her skill. The team departed the next morning aboard a stealth transport. During the journey, Sarah noticed a subtle change in how the other squad members treated her. Where before there had been barely concealed contempt, now there was careful professional respect. They still didn't understand her weapon, but they had seen what it could do. Thys approached her during the journey, his movements graceful despite the ship's turbulence. "Chen," he said, settling into the seat beside her. "I owe you an apology." Sarah looked up from where she was cleaning her rifle. The Ilarian's silver skin had taken on a slightly darker hue, which she had learned indicated embarrassment. "For what?" she asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "For dismissing your capabilities based on your equipment," Thys replied. "In my culture, advancement is measured by technological sophistication. I failed to consider that mastery of simpler tools might represent a different kind of advancement." Sarah considered his words while running the cleaning rod through her rifle barrel. "Where I come from, we have a saying. It's not the arrow, it's the archer. Technology can give you an advantage, but it can't give you skill, patience, or understanding. Thais nodded slowly. Perhaps that is why humans have adapted so quickly to galactic society. You don't rely on technology to solve your problems. We use it, Sarah corrected, but we don't let it think for us. Their conversation was interrupted as the ship's pilot announced their approach to Kepler 442b. Through the viewports, Sarah could see a rust-colored world with towering mesas and deep canyons. The research station appeared as a small cluster of structures in a valley between two mountain ranges. Initial scans show no life signs, the pilot reported, but there are unusual energy readings from the facility. Something's definitely wrong down there. The squad deployed via drop pods, landing in a defensive formation 2 kilometers from the research station. Sarah immediately sought high ground, finding a position on a rocky ridge that offered commanding views of the entire valley. Through her scope, she could see the research station in detail. The buildings appeared intact, but something was off. The usual signs of occupation were missing. No lights, no movement, no vehicles in the parking areas. "Overwatch in position," Sarah reported through her comm. "Station appears deserted. No visible damage to structures." "Copy that," Thys responded. He was leading the main assault team toward the facility. "Maintain surveillance and report any movement." Sarah settled into her hide, adjusting her position to minimize fatigue while maintaining maximum visibility. This was what she had trained for her entire military career: the patient watch, the careful observation, the readiness to act in an instant if needed. For 2 hours, the squad methodically approached and entered the research station. Sarah tracked their progress through the scope, noting their positions and ready to provide covering fire if needed. The facility remained eerily silent. Then Kira's voice crackled through the comm, filled with telepathic strain. "Something's wrong. I'm sensing alien minds. Not human, not any galactic species I recognize. They're different, cold, empty." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The Void Swarm had been more legend than reality for most of the galaxy, a distant threat that consumed worlds on the far rim. But if they were here, in a research facility so close to galactic core worlds. "How many?" Thys asked. "I can't tell. They're distributed somehow, like they're connected but separate. And they're moving. Fast." Through her scope, Sarah saw the first of them. They emerged from the research station like liquid shadow, flowing rather than walking. Each creature stood roughly humanoid, but wrong in every detail. Their skin was the color of deep space, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Where faces should be, there were only smooth surfaces with occasional flickers of bioluminescence. "Contact," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Unknown hostiles emerging from the main building. Count 12, no, 18. More coming." The creatures moved with predatory grace, spreading out to surround the squad. Sarah could see her teammates taking defensive positions, but they were caught in the open between buildings with limited cover. "Permission to engage?" Sarah asked. "Negative," Thys replied immediately. "Orders are to observe and withdraw. We fall back to the extraction point." But the Void Swarm creatures had other plans. They moved faster than anything Sarah had ever seen, covering impossible distances in seconds. Their forms seemed to blur and shift, making them difficult to track even through her scope. The first energy blast lit up the valley as Grimjaw's plasma cannon roared to life. The shot should have vaporized any organic target, but the creature it struck simply absorbed the energy, its dark skin glowing briefly before returning to its light-eating black. "Energy weapons are ineffective," Grimjaw bellowed through the comm. "Repeat, energy weapons are not working." Sarah watched in horror as the creatures swarmed toward her teammates. Thys fired his rifle repeatedly, the coherent light beams passing through the aliens as if they were made of shadow. The Chithi tried coordinated fire, but their energy weapons proved equally useless. "Fall back," Thais ordered. "Fighting withdrawal to the extraction point." But the creatures were too fast. One of them reached Kira before she could retreat, its form flowing around her like liquid darkness. The Scion's scream cut through the calm before abruptly ending. Sarah's training took over. Without waiting for orders, she lined up her first shot. The creature holding Kira filled her scope, its alien form difficult to track but not impossible. She led it slightly, accounting for its unnatural movement, and squeezed the trigger. The kinetic round struck the creature's center mass and punched completely through it. Unlike the energy weapons, her bullet had a physical effect. The alien staggered, dark fluid spraying from the wound, and released its grip on Kira. "Kinetic weapons work," Sarah reported, already cycling the bolt for her next shot. "Physical projectiles are effective." She fired again, striking another creature that had cornered two of the Chithi. This one dropped immediately, the rifle bullet doing devastating damage to whatever passed for its vital organs. The tactical situation changed instantly. Thais began coordinating the squad's withdrawal while Sarah provided covering fire from her elevated position. Her rifle cracked repeatedly, each shot carefully placed to maximum effect. But there were too many creatures, and they had learned to avoid her field of fire. More emerged from the research station, their numbers seemingly endless. Soon, Sarah counted over 50 of the shadow-like aliens converging on the valley. "Extraction ETA?" Thys called as the squad fought their way toward the pickup point. 20 minutes, came the pilot's response. Sarah's heart sank. Her teammates were brave and skilled, but they couldn't hold against 50 void swarm creatures for 20 minutes, especially when most of their weapons were useless. She made a decision that would have horrified her instructors. "Squad, disengage and proceed to extraction," she ordered, assuming tactical command. "I'll buy you time." "Chen, negative," Thys responded immediately. "We don't leave teammates behind." "You're not leaving me," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "I'm giving you an order. I can hold them from this position, but only if you move now." She punctuated her words with another shot, dropping a creature that had been flanking Grimjaw's position. Through her scope, she could see the massive Korath looking up toward her hide, his alien features conveying emotions she could read despite the species barrier. "Go," she repeated. "That's an order." The next 18 minutes were the longest of Sarah's life. She fired with mechanical precision, making every shot count, while the creatures swarmed through the valley below. Her rifle grew hot from sustained fire, but the old weapon performed flawlessly. When the extraction ship finally arrived and her squad was safely aboard, Sarah prepared for her own withdrawal. She had used most of her ammunition and was down to her last magazine. The Void Swarm creatures had finally located her position and were beginning to climb the rocky slope toward her hide. As she prepared to abandon her position, Sarah looked back through her scope one final time. What she saw made her blood freeze. More ships were descending from orbit, dozens of them, filled with additional Void Swarm forces. This wasn't a simple scouting mission or research raid. This was the beginning of an invasion. Sarah keyed her comm one final time as she retreated toward the extraction point. "Command, this is Chen. The outer reach has fallen. The war has begun. The newest or most powerful technology. Sometimes it was about perfecting the old ways and making them work better than anyone thought possible." But as she cleaned her rifle and prepared to leave the range, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Void Swarm was coming. The Galactic Defense Council assembled in emergency session within hours of Alpha Squad's return. Representatives from 100 different species filled the vast amphitheater on Central Station, their voices creating a cacophony of fear and disbelief as they debated humanity's dire intelligence report. Sarah stood before the council, still in her combat gear. Her rifle slung across her back, The weapon that had once been a source of mockery now drew curious and respectful glances from the assembled delegates. Word of its effectiveness against the Void Swarm had spread quickly through military channels. "The humans' report is impossible," declared Ambassador Veltar of the Hegemony Coalition, his 4 insectoid eyes clicking in agitation. "Our energy barriers make us immune to primitive kinetic weapons. If Void Swarm creatures are vulnerable to simple projectiles, why do they pose a threat to advanced civilizations?" Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Because energy shields don't work against them. They absorb energy, redirect it, feed on it. But physical matter, metal, ceramic, simple kinetic force, that's something they can't manipulate." A ripple of uncomfortable shifting went through the assembled delegates. For over 1,000 years, galactic warfare had evolved beyond kinetic weapons. Plasma cannons, particle beams, gravitational disruptors, and quantum entanglement weapons had made simple bullets seem as obsolete as stone axes. High Admiral Corinth, a towering reptilian whose species commanded the largest fleet in the galaxy, rose from his position. "Even if kinetic weapons are effective, we lack the infrastructure to manufacture them in meaningful quantities. Our factories produce energy weapons. Our tactics assume energy-based warfare. You're asking us to rebuild our entire military doctrine." "No," Sarah replied, her tone respectful but firm. "I'm asking you to remember what you've forgotten." She gestured to her rifle. "This weapon represents 10,000 years of human warfare evolution. We never abandoned kinetic weapons because we never developed effective energy shields. We kept improving bullets, gunpowder, targeting systems, and ballistic science because that's all we had." Instructor Vex, who had been observing silently from the military section, stood and activated his speaking privilege. "The human speaks truth. My people have studied warfare across the galaxy for centuries. When species develop energy-based defenses, they abandon kinetic research. It becomes a dead end in their technological tree." "But humans never developed such defenses," Sarah continued. "We joined galactic society before we made that transition. So while the rest of you perfected energy weapons, we kept perfecting the old ways. We never stopped making better bullets." A young delegate from the Crystal Shores, her translucent body shimmering with nervous energy, raised a delicate hand. "Even accepting your premise, one human with an ancient rifle cannot stop an invasion fleet. The numbers alone—" "You're right," Sarah interrupted. "One rifle can't stop a fleet, but 50 million rifles can." The chamber fell silent. Admiral Corinth's eyes narrowed. "What are you proposing?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for during the entire journey back to Central Station. Earth has maintained kinetic weapon production capabilities, not just small arms, but artillery, tank guns, naval weapons, even kinetic orbital platforms. We kept them as backup systems, partly out of tradition and partly because we couldn't afford to replace everything immediately. She paused, looking around the chamber. Right now, Earth's industrial capacity could produce 10 million kinetic rifles within 6 months. Our training facilities could teach basic marksmanship to any species with compatible physiology, and our tactical doctrines could be adapted for galactic use. The implications sent another wave of whispers through the chamber. Earth was still a minor player in galactic politics, a young species with limited representation. But if what Sarah proposed was true, they might possess the key to defeating humanity's greatest threat. Ambassador Thys rose from the observer section. As Alpha Squad's commander, he had been granted special speaking privileges. "I have fought alongside Lieutenant Chen. I have seen her weapon in action. But more importantly, I have seen her tactical thinking. Humans don't just possess effective weapons, they possess effective minds for using them." He activated a holographic display showing battle footage from the research station. The assembled delegates watched in fascination and horror as Sarah's precise shots dropped void swarm creatures that had shrugged off energy blasts. Notice her patience, Thys continued. Her calculation of environmental factors without computer assistance. Her ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. These are not just technical skills, they are warrior instincts developed over millennia of kinetic warfare. High Admiral Corinth studied the battle footage carefully. The tactical applications are intriguing. Long-range precision engagement, battlefield control through fear rather than area denial. But the logistical challenges remain enormous. Sarah nodded. Earth understands those challenges, but we also understand something else. This war isn't about who has the best technology anymore. It's about who can adapt fastest to a completely new type of enemy. She gestured again to her rifle. Every species in this chamber has weapons that are technically superior to this. But when those weapons failed, this one worked. Not because it's more advanced, but because it's different. Because it thinks differently. Explain, commanded the Admiral. Galactic warfare assumes energy-based conflicts, Sarah said. Your tactics, your strategies, your entire military philosophy is built around energy shields, power management, and technological superiority. But the Void Swarm operates on different principles. They use your technological dependence against you. She activated her own small holographic display, showing Earth's military doctrine. Human warfare never abandoned the fundamentals: cover and concealment, battlefield awareness, precision targeting, fire and movement. These concepts work regardless of technology level because they're based on physics and psychology, not engineering. The chamber erupted in debate as delegates argued among themselves in dozens of languages. Sarah waited patiently, her rifle a comforting weight against her back. She had said what needed saying. Now the politicians would decide whether the galaxy would adapt or die. After an hour of heated discussion, High Admiral Corinth called for order. The Defense Council will vote on the following proposition: immediate establishment of joint training protocols with Earth's military forces, expedited production of kinetic weapons across all member worlds, and temporary reorganization of fleet combat doctrines to incorporate kinetic warfare principles. The vote was closer than Sarah had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. 67 species voted in favor, 38 against, with 5 abstentions. Earth had just become the galaxy's military training center. As the delegates began filing out to prepare for the largest military reorganization in galactic history, Instructor Vex approached Sarah. "You realize what you've just accomplished?" he asked, his skin cycling through colors Sarah had never seen before. "I've convinced them to try something different," Sarah replied. "Whether it works remains to be seen." "No," Vex said quietly. "You've reminded them that advancement isn't always forward motion. Sometimes it's remembering what worked before and making it work better." 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the GSS Determination, flagship of the newly reorganized Galactic Defense Fleet. Through the massive viewport, she could see hundreds of ships extending in formation as far as the eye could track. But these vessels looked different from the sleek energy weapon platforms of the old fleet. Kinetic weapon ports dotted their hulls. Magnetic accelerator cannons, rail guns, and missile tubes had been retrofitted onto ships designed for energy combat. It was ugly, improvised, and completely contrary to 1,000 years of galactic naval architecture. It was also humanity's best hope for survival. "Contact on long-range sensors," announced the ship's Chithi sensor operator. "Void swarm fleet emerging from hyperspace. Estimated 200 vessels." Sarah checked her rifle one final time and moved toward her assigned battle station. Around her, warriors from a dozen species prepared for combat. Some carried energy weapons as backups, but most now carried kinetic rifles manufactured in Earth's factories and customized for their species' physiology. Commander Thys appeared beside her, his own rifle, a human design modified for Ilarian anatomy, ready for action. Any final advice from humanity's expert on primitive warfare? Sarah smiled, thinking of her grandfather and all the human warriors who had carried similar weapons into battle across Earth's violent history. Remember what I told you at the academy? It's not the arrow, it's the archer. The weapon doesn't win battles, the warrior does. As the first Void Swarm ships closed to engagement range, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time since humanity had reached for the stars, they weren't trying to catch up to galactic civilization. Instead, galactic civilization was finally catching up to lessons humanity had learned long ago. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had been such effective warriors long before they had access to energy weapons, faster than light travel, or galactic technology. They were about to rediscover the deadly effectiveness of well-trained soldiers with simple tools and the knowledge of how to use them. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and humanity would not be watching from the sidelines this time. "All stations, this is Admiral Chen," came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Sarah blinked in surprise. Her older sister had been promoted to fleet command during the reorganization, becoming the first human to hold such a position in galactic military history. "Today, we don't fight with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy," Admiral Chen continued. "We fight with the most proven ones. We fight with tools our ancestors would recognize, guided by principles they would understand. We fight not because we are the most advanced species in the galaxy, but because we remember what it means to be warriors." Sarah took her position as the first kinetic rounds began flying between the opposing fleets. Energy shields designed to stop plasma bolts and particle beams offered no protection against simple metal projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The Void Swarm had conquered dozens of worlds by turning their enemies' advanced technology against them. But they had never faced an enemy that refused to rely on that technology, an enemy that had never forgotten the simple, deadly effectiveness of putting pieces of metal exactly where they needed to go. For the first time since the invasion began, the Void Swarm was about to face humanity on humanity's terms. And humanity had been very, very good at war for a very long time. And when it arrived, the galaxy would need every advantage it could get, even the primitive ones.